Welcome, greetings, good afternoon. The thought I want to consider with my young friends who would be listening to me across the states of India and across the continents is this. Is it desirable, is it useful to believe in God? The question is not if there is God or not. The question is if young people should believe in God or have a sense of God awareness or godliness about their life or not. Let me begin this with a personal experience, or let me begin on a personal note. One of the things that helped me all through my life, particularly when I was young and full of energy, was something that my mother told me when I was a young lad of, say, 8 or 9, around that time. I was inclined to be melancholic as a child. Most of the time, I was lonely. I had very few friends. Most of the time, I would get into the room, a small room that I had, shut the door, shut myself in, and occasionally read a book. In those days, we didn't have many books, whatever there was, but that was all. And I would go into occasional spells of gloom, melancholy. My mother was very sensitive about this, and I grew up in a single parent family. My mother raised us. She was very, very intuitive about it. So she knew that on that particular day I was unusually depressed. So she came into my room. She sat quietly beside me for a while, then put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, there is light within you. Time will prove it." That's what she said. Of course, in Malayalam. Of course, in Malayalam. She also said to me on another occasion, and that quoting from the Epistle of Paul, "Your body is the temple of God. Keep it clean." Two things that my mother told me. I tell you, my young friends, nothing in my entire life helped me more than these two things. The first of her affirmations, namely that there is light within me, at a time when I was deep in the doldrums, when I thought all around me was dark and shall I say, cheerless, hopeless. There is light within you. I held on to that revelation. I use the word revelation on purpose all through my life. I believed in it firmly. It enabled me to reach where I did. It's enough to say that. As regards to telling me that my body should be considered the temple of the Holy Spirit, the temple of God, let me only say this, that when I went to St. Stephen's College, Delhi in 1971 to be a postgraduate student of English literature, I was perhaps the only student in St. Stephen's College at that time of the postgraduate level who did not experiment with psychedelic drugs and alcohol. Not even once. And I was offered everything free. And I was told to my face that a young man who did not experiment with these things was a sissy. And I was held contemptible by my contemporaries, and I had no friends in St. Stephen's College because I was not deemed up to the mark. But I considered that to be a great advantage because it meant that I was left with all the time in the world to study as I wanted. I had no distractions. I was discarded. And therefore, I was protected. My time was protected. So I did exceptionally well. Had I gone into the blind alleys of what was fashionable, what was held necessary by my colleagues, my contemporaries, I would have been in the pits. What saved me in situations like this is this revelation. So when, as a young boy, I was told that I was the temple of God, I experienced a tremendous sense of worth. Tremendous. Imagine you're being the temple of God. I mean, what a thought it is. And beyond that, imagine you're carrying light within you. Can you think of anything more exciting than this? Now, my mother could say these things too because she was a God-fearing person. To him, God was real. She suffered from very serious health problems and she was dying inch by inch. And she died over a period of 10 years. And she survived 10 years because of the strength of her faith. And she held on to God. So, what her words did to me was to give me a sense of self-worth, number one. Secondly, a sense of tremendous purpose, which was larger than what I could perceive at that time. So, based on this personal experience, I want to bear witness to my young people that it's a matter of great advantage. There's no compulsion about it. You're perfectly free to accept it or reject it. But it's a matter of great advantage to be aligned to God. Now, the beauty of God is that God does not thrust himself on anybody. God chooses to be a hidden presence. And unfortunately, those who are shallow and naive take God's hiddenness for his absence. What is hidden, according to them, is absent. If that logic is right, what is hidden does not exist. If that logic is correct, then your heart does not exist. Your lungs don't exist. Your kidneys don't exist. Your liver doesn't exist, so on and so forth. It's such a specious logic. As a matter of fact, the most vital things about life are all hidden. However, that's another subject. Now, what young people need, more than anything else, I believe, is a great sense of worth about themselves. Now, if you really think of any situation in which you happen to cheapen yourself, invariably, all such moments had one common denominator, namely, you had no God awareness. It can never happen in your life that you had God awareness and you involve yourself in anything that cheapens and degrades yourself. It's just impossible. That one thing is enough to convince, if you can be convinced at all, that it helps very greatly to have God awareness. But that's not all. The second thing that this did in my life was to keep me motivated, keyed up all the time, keep me passionate about doing my very best. Imagine being the temple of God. Imagine being the bearer of light. How can you be second rate? Imagine you're really believing that God has great purposes for you and that you're steadily moving in the direction. Then you know that when the time comes, you should not be found wanting. And therefore, the parable of the 10 maidens made a lot of good sense very early in my life. If you think of that parable, after all, they are maidens, they are young. That parable should relate to the predicament of young people. It is a parable about youth. Many people don't realize it. So there were 10 maidens, 10 young ladies, if you like. 5 of them were wise, 5 of them were foolish. What is the difference between the wise and the foolish? They did not value themselves. The symbol of the lamp without the oil is a symbol of individuals neglecting themselves, individuals failing to shore up the treasures that do not perish, in the words of Jesus Christ, Matthew chapter 6. See, one of the temptations when we are young is to get lost in the world out there, the brave, bold, new world, the wide, wide world out there, full of excitement. Remember the story of the prodigal son, the young man who went to the far country and made a confounded ass of himself. He wasted his substance. Why? The principle must be understood. When we do not have a God awareness, when we have no sense of godliness, when we have no sense of self-worth, what happens is we become almost defenselessly vulnerable to the pressures, compulsions, and seductions of the external world. We get pulled out of our orbit by those forces external to us. That is what happened to this young man in the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son. If he had any sense of self-worth, he would not have succumbed to this centrifugal pull, if you like, in the words of physics. Centripetal, the force that pulls you to the center. It would have been the homeward pull. Centrifugal, the force that pulls you away from the home, if you like. Fortunately, when he reached the dead end of his life, the centripetal force began to act on him. The centripetal force was his memory, good memory about a loving father and a wonderful home, and that enabled him to come back. But the problem was that he neglected his inner life and he got completely absorbed into the world outside, the external world. Now, when godliness comes into our life, what happens is there is a reorientation. We realize, as Jesus teaches us, we realize that the sphere of incomparable and enduring worth is our inner life. And whatever seems very attractive, desirable, and exciting in the so-called brave, bold world are mere illusions of whatever is considered to be fashionable, great, valuable, etc., etc. The external world really is a world of shadows. It has got its own relevance, it's got its own place. After all, many of our activities, in fact, all of our activities must take place in the world outside. But we can work just as we can work with our body only because our heart, lungs, etc., the vital organs are hidden inside the body and they power the body to work in the world outside. So also, in relation to the larger things of life, we can go out and work and engage with the world out there meaningfully, fruitfully, only if our inner life is filled with God awareness, which protects us, enables us to discern, choose what is right and reject what is wrong, choose what is healthy and reject what is insalubrious or unhealthy or harmful, so that the wealth and health of our personality is not only preserved intact, but is constantly, continually enhanced. And that is a tremendous source of blessedness. Now, why is it that God chooses to be a hidden presence? God chooses to be so because God respects the freedom of choice you are given. After all, it is God who gave you freedom of choice. God is the origin, God is the fountain spring of freedom. Your freedom is not man's charity to you. Freedom is God's gift. Value it as such. In fact, there is a direct correlation throughout history between ungodliness and bondage. Ungodliness breeds bondage or slavery. Again, another huge subject in history. More of that on a future occasion. So, God chooses to be a hidden presence because He respects your freedom of choice. Now, if God were a visible presence with all the majesty and power and all the rest of it, you would not have had freedom of choice in relation to God. God would have become a cosmic policeman, and you would have been intimidated into falling in line. Surely that's not a desirable option. Thank God that system does not exist. But the problem is this: most people, unfortunately, do not realize that with freedom comes responsibility and accountability. And the responsibility and accountability that young people must experience, as I did experience when I was of your age, is the fact that the gift of freedom brings in its wake the duty to realize the source of that freedom, which, as I said, is Godhead. And then also to be accountable to God for the way we use our freedom, which is, after all, that's God's gift. Every gift entails a reciprocal obligation, a duty. A privilege should never be separated from the duty that goes with it, because the moment a privilege is separated from duties and responsibilities, the privilege begins to degenerate and it begins to be dangerous and counterproductive. So surely you're given the freedom to believe or not to believe, to choose or to reject. It's all up to you. But the consequences are there and they can't be avoided. And I taught literature all my life, and my specialization was the mature tragedies of Shakespeare. The core tragic fact of life is that each one of us is free to act, free to choose, free to act. But we are not free to modulate or escape the consequences of our choices and actions. There, the law of necessity acts upon us. And the Greeks called it nemesis. So choose as you wish, but remember that to every choice there's a consequence. But unfortunately, these consequences come a bit too late. And once the consequences begin to manifest themselves, they assume a life and a logic of their own, and they become almost uncontrollable. And as the British novelist Thomas Hardy wrote, I think it's in a novel titled Jude the Obscure. There's a strange thing about life is that wisdom comes too late. By the time we become wise enough to act in a sensible manner, the opportunity to do anything at all would be gone. And Jesus said pretty much the same thing. He says, do the work of light when there is still light, for the night is coming when no man can do any work. The book of Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 1 says, young people, remember your Creator while you are young. You are created. You are created. For the life of me, I cannot persuade myself to believe that I'm a mere bubble of accident. I'm a product of historical accident. I cannot believe that. The moment you and I believe that we are mere accidents in the endless flow of time, then we lose all self-worth and we become the rubbish of history. Unfortunately, many people queue up for it. I don't know what sense it makes, but it happens. So, it helps to be wise when we are young, and that wisdom, I believe, can be received from the teachings of Jesus Christ. That's why I hold on to the teachings of Jesus Christ like the breath of my life. So I commend the 4 Gospels to you. Please read them. Read them with an open mind. You need not have any pietistic airs and presumptions or background or anything. I started reading the Gospels for the sake of literature, actually. I started reading the Bible and learning the Bible by heart in order to learn the English language. Because when I was growing up and I wanted to learn English as a language, I was living in a situation where I could never hear somebody speak even a single sentence in English. So it was an uphill task for me to teach myself this beautiful language, this very demanding and complex language. How could I do it in a context which was completely free of English as a language? The Bible was a great help, great, great, great help. Even today, my written style is considered unique by many people, especially those who have reviewed my books from overseas, mainly because the style of the King James's version of the English Bible has gone so deep into my linguistic imagination that when I write, it influences the very texture of the style that I use. So, reading the Bible was a tremendous help. It certainly helped me to excel in the study of literature. And I reap the benefit of it even today. So, even from that very practical, low down the ground purpose, it was a great help. But more than that, the sense of godliness actually steadied the ship of my life, which could have been easily wrecked when I was young. So, anyway, these are some of the thoughts I thought I would share with you. As I said in one of the earlier videos, God gave me the opportunity to invest my entire life to the building up of young lives. I served in the domain of higher education in India, both as a teacher and then as an administrator in higher education. I retired as a principal at St. Stephen's College, but also had opportunities to serve in other capacities, like being the founder member of the Delhi Minorities Commission, the founder member of the National Commission for Minority Education Institutions, member of the National Integration Council, and so on and so forth. A number of these were all experiences that got added to the repertoire of my awareness and sensibilities. That's the reason why I'm making a quick, lightning fast reference to these things. I have no need to give you a resume of my life. I'm only saying that behind every word that I share with you, there is a whole background. And above all, the one necessary background is that I love you. I love you not because I'm a fountain spring of love. I love you because God loves you. And I share something, a teeny weeny bit of that love, God's love for you. So please ponder over these words that I have shared at random. I don't use, as you say, I don't use a piece of paper. I have no notes with me. I just share the thoughts that come flooding into my mind. And I believe that these thoughts are relevant and useful to you. May it prove to be so. May God bless you. And do invite people into sharing these insights, concerns, and life experiences. I have a lot to share. Depending on how the Spirit guides me, I shall continue to do so. Let's consolidate this fellowship of mind and heart and spirit, and let's see how God fills our relationship with His light so that it becomes the guiding light for each one of us to reach the glorious destination that God in His abundant and unmatched love has for each one of us. Thank you, and see you soon.